Rowena Starfall learned to keep her eyes down, her voice dull, and her wrists turned inward so no one in Duskwalker colors could see how badly the iron had chewed her skin. In the basement kitchen, steam from boiling bones clung to the ceiling like a second lower sky. Smoke stung her eyes. Grease slicked the stone under her bare feet. She stood over a copper pot taller than her hip, stirring turnip mash for men who called her girl, and never looked twice at the old royal ring scar hidden under the ash rubbed into her knuckles. "Faster!" barked Mistress Heddle the housekeeper, slapping the back of Rowena's head with a spoon. "His lordship's guests don't eat peasant slop cold." Rowena's knees buckled and locked again. Her body had been wrong for days. Too hot, too cold, dizzy if she stood still, nauseous if she moved too quickly. She'd blamed stale grain, blamed stress, blamed the wolfsbane dust Tobias liked mixed into servant tea to keep mutts obedient. She did not blame fate. Fate had never once taken her side. A boy from the upper hall came in with a tray of emptied goblets and a grin too old for his thin face. "They're asking for the gray one," he said, jerking his chin toward her. "Lord Tobias wants wine in the study, and he said, 'Wash your mouth first. Regent men don't like pig stink.'" Laughter rose from the scullery maids. One muttered, loud enough to carry, "Maybe she'll get lucky and he'll keep her upstairs tonight. Better cushions than chains." Rowena kept stirring, kept breathing, kept her wolf, small, starved, mostly silent these last years, curled tight under her ribs where no one could hear it whine. Mistress Heddle caught her jaw in a hard hand and turned her face toward the brazier light. "You smile, you hear me? You are lucky Duskwalker took you in when the Starfalls burned. Could have left you in the snow with the rest." The lie was old enough to have grooves. Tobias had not taken her in. Tobias had butchered her house, forged her death papers, and collared her in his own cellar. But speaking truth in Duskwalker Estate was like throwing yourself onto a blade and asking if it was sharp. Rowena dipped her head. "Yes, mistress." When Heddle released her, Rowena wiped her mouth with stale vinegar as ordered, set a bottle of red on a tray, and climbed the back stairs. Each step tugged at the rubbed raw skin where iron cuffs rode under her sleeves. She had once walked marbled galleries in moonsilk and silver pins, daughter of House Starfall, taught to read treaties before she bled. Now she counted stairs so she wouldn't count losses. At the landing outside Tobias's study, two sentries in Duskwalker black stood with their spears crossed. One sniffed her as she approached, wrinkling his nose. "That one still smells like kennel straw." The other grinned. "Lord likes her that way. Easier to remember what she is." Rowena stared at the tray, not the men. Wine for his lordship. They uncrossed spears. She stepped through the half-open door into smoke and amber lamplight. Tobias Duskwalker stood by the hearth, broad shoulders draped in sable, a silver wolf pin at his throat where the starfall moon should have been. He had her mother's cheekbones and none of her mercy. Across from him sat a thin priest in regent white and red, fingers stained dark at the nails, and a clerk scratching notes into vellum with a sharp, quick hand. Rowena placed the bottle on the side table and reached for cups. Tobias didn't look at her. "Leave it." She bowed and retreated to the door but did not step through. The sentries had shifted. One was peering down the corridor at raised voices from the main hall. For a heartbeat, no one watched her. Then Tobias said, clear as a hammer strike, "The girl is fertile. I had her bled at Winter's turn. Strong line, no madness markers. Whatever starfall left in her will breed true." The priest's voice was reedy. "The regent requires certainty. The claimant must be erased in law and blood. If she births under your seal, with proper oathing, her issue can be entered as Duskwalker collateral." "Collateral?" Tobias laughed softly. "Call it what it is. A docile womb with convenient ancestry." The clerk did not look up as he wrote. Something in Rowena's chest turned to ice so quickly she almost dropped the tray. She had known Tobias would kill her someday. That had always been the shape of the end. But this was slower, filthier, a cage built inside her own skin. The priest asked, "And if she refuses pairing?" Tobias swirled wine in his cup. "She has been broken for years. She will not refuse. If she does, you may take a finger and ask again." He finally glanced toward the doorway, and Rowena ducked her head before his gaze fully found her. She slipped out, pulse roaring in her ears, and walked, not ran, down the passage. At the top of the servants' stairs, she bent over and retched dry into the shadows. A docile womb. Her hand flew to her abdomen without thought. Flat still. Hers. Her body hers. Her blood hers. Even if every law these men forged said otherwise. Below, in the laundry room, Mistress Heddle seized her by the arm. "Where have you been?" "His lordship wants the grey linen packed for travel." "Travel?" Rowena forced her voice steady. "Don't ask questions above your rank." Heddle shoved a bundle into her chest. "And put irons on for the night now. Captain said no mistakes. Regent's card arrives before dawn." Before dawn. The floor seemed to tilt. Rowena nodded, took the linens, and kept moving until she reached the old drying corridor no one used because the south wall leaked in spring. She stood there in damp stone dark, breath tearing in and out, and understood with a clarity so sharp it hurt. If she slept in Duskwalker chains tonight, she would never be free again. She moved, not wildly, not loudly. She had survived by being careful. She went first to the steward's room, where keys hung by size over a ledger desk. She knew the squeak in the third floorboard and stepped over it. She knew which key opened storage, which opened the iron cupboard, which opened the side postern used by ash carts. Her fingers shook anyway. In the iron cupboard lay travel papers already sealed with Duskwalker wax. She broke the seal with her thumbnail and scanned fast through script blurred by panic. Name: Rhea Cole. Position: kitchen drudge. Place of origin: Lowford Parish. Ownership mark: transferable, transferable. She swallowed bile, folded the forged papers, and tucked them into her bodice. From there she stole what a servant could vanish with: a heel of hard bread, a skin of water, a wool shawl with a hole at the fringe, a knife no longer than her palm. In the chain room she sat on a crate and unlocked her night irons, biting down on her sleeve to muffle the sound when metal slid over torn skin. The cuffs left her wrists ringed red-purple, weeping where scabs had cracked. Voices thundered above, men shouting, boots running, a dog barking twice, then cutting off. Her time had already narrowed. She took the laundry chute because no one would expect dignity in escape. She dropped in darkness, slammed shoulder first into wet sheets, and lay stunned as cold water soaked her dress. Then she crawled through the ash passage to the postern, opened it with frozen fingers, and slipped into sleet-laced night. The wind hit like a slap. Snowmelt mud sucked at her ankles. Behind her, Duskwalker Estate loomed black and gold against the ridge, all lit windows and banners and teeth. A horn sounded. One note, then two. Rowena ran. She cut through slaughter yards, through birch scrub, over the old boundary wall where stones had crumbled from frost. Brambles ripped her stockings. Ice water filled her boots. She kept one hand pressed to her bodice, feeling for papers as if parchment could be armor. At dawn, she reached Lowford, a border village huddled around a leaning chapel and a blacksmith's shed. Smoke rose thin from roofs. Men at the well glanced up at her servant Gray and looked away. Good. Invisible was safer than pitied. By noon, she could not keep food down. Cramping gnawed low in her belly, sharp enough to make her crouch beside a pig pen with her forehead against rough wood. An old woman carrying kindling stopped, squinted, and said, "You look dead on your feet, girl." Midwife's in the tannery loft. If she ain't died of her own fever yet. Rowena climbed the loft ladder on shaking legs. The room stank of vinegar, blood, and boiled willow bark. The midwife lay on a cot under 3 blankets, face slick with sweat, a lantern guttering beside her. Her eyes were bright and unfocused. "No coin," Rowena said hoarsely. "I just need pain herbs, something to settle my gut." The old woman's gaze snapped to her wrists, then to her face. "Lie down. I can't stay. Lie down, or bleed standing." The midwife caught Rowena's forearm with surprising strength and pressed 2 fingers hard below her navel, then to her throat, then to the inside of her wrist where pulse jumped frantic. She went still, listened, like a hunter in snow. Then she hissed through her teeth, "By moon and fang!" Rowena tried to sit up. "What?" "Not what. 2." The midwife's fever-bright stare fixed on her. "You're carrying twins." The word cracked open the room. Rowena stared at her, uncomprehending. "No," she whispered. "That's not possible." The midwife ignored her. She laid both palms over Rowena's abdomen, eyes half shut, and muttered old sensing words. Her expression changed from certainty to alarm. "Different rhythms," she rasped. "One heartbeat runs silver cold, old sovereignty blood. The other burns like alpha fire. 2 bonds. God spare us." Below, someone banged through the tannery door. Voices rose. "Mara? You alive up there?" The midwife, Mara, shouted back before Rowena could stop her. "Get Elder Bran, now! This one's marked." Panic flared white-hot. Rowena stumbled off the cot, nearly fell, caught herself on a beam. "Don't," she said. "Please, don't tell anyone." Too late. Footsteps pounded up the ladder. 3 villagers crowded into the loft, then 5, then more in the doorway craning to look. Faces went from curiosity to fear in breaths. "Twins?" someone whispered. "From 2 bonds, Mara says." "Civil bloodshed omen." "Pack law says one must be yielded." "No," Rowena said, backing toward the wall. "No law owns my children." A broad man with a wolf-toothed torque, the village elder maybe pack adjacent, lifted his hands placatingly. "Girl, calm. We can help if you submit to proper rights." The fire-marked babe goes to neutral guardianship, keeps peace between lines. "I said no." She bolted. Down the ladder, through the tannery, into streets already turning hostile with rumor. Someone grabbed her shawl. It tore free. She ran uphill toward the timber palisade at the village's north edge, where mountain trails began and refugee camps clung to ridges like moss. By dusk she reached Frostbourne settlement. Not a fortress, just a raw-built hall of green pine and stone, ringed by half-finished cabins, cook fires, and sharpened stakes. Wolves moved everywhere. Scarred men and women in mixed leathers, children carrying kindling, sentries on platforms with ash bows, refugees, survivors. Their scents hit her all at once: smoke, wet wool, steel oil, grief. 2 guards crossed spears as she approached. "State your name." Rowena handed over the forged papers because truth had gotten people killed all day. "Rhea Cole, kitchen drudge, seeking shelter for 1 night." A guard scanned the parchment, frowned at the Duskwalker seal smeared from rain. "Why does a drudge from Lowford carry a lord's transfer pass?" Before she could answer, hoofbeats thundered from below the ridge, riders, fast and many. A horn called from Frostbourne's south watch. "Banners on the lower road, Duskwalker Black." Another horn answered from the east. "Second party, red and bone sigil, regent emissaries." The camp snapped into motion. Boughs lifted, children pulled behind walls, orders barked. In the chaos, an elder woman stared hard at Rowena's belly and spat into the dirt. "It's her, the omen bitch from Lowford." Word traveled like wildfire in dry brush. "Twins, 2 bonds. Surrender one or bleed all." Rowena shoved past the guards toward the hall doors because stone and roof meant maybe 1 minute to think. Inside, the big room was half finished, rafters exposed, long tables rough-hewn, maps pinned to a central post with bone pegs. Men and women argued in a tight knot near the hearth. Can't harbor her, not with Duskwalker at our gate. If the fire-marked child is real, every rival alpha will claim right. Where is Wulfric? A man turned at that name. He stood near the far table, taller than the others, broad-shouldered under a plain dark coat. One side of his jaw scarred pale from ear to chin, as if fire had once tried and failed to take him. Grief sat on him like armor. So did command. His eyes, ember gold in firelight, locked on Rowena's face, then dropped to the bloody rings on her wrists. Someone shouted behind her, "Riders breach the south fence!" The room jolted. Rowena took one more step, and the floor rolled out from under her. Exhaustion, fear, hunger. Everything she had outrun finally caught her by the throat. She fell forward toward Stone, and strong hands caught her before she hit. Strong hands caught her before she hit. Heat slammed through Rowena's body so hard it was almost pain. Not fever heat, not panic. Something cleaner, sharper. Like lightning finding the one metal line buried under earth and choosing it. His palm braced her spine, his other hand locked around her forearm, and a thread of sensation snapped tight between them. Silver and gold, moon cold and ember hot, drawn bowstring from his chest to hers. Wulfric Frostborn sucked in a breath like he'd been struck. The hall noise, the shouted orders, the horns outside, boots hammering across plank, fell away to a muffled roar. Rowena felt her pulse stutter, then settle into a new rhythm that was not hers alone. Her wolf, silent for years except for hunger and fear, lurched awake inside her with a cry that sounded like winter cracking on a river. She gasped and clutched his coat. His eyes flashed, not metaphor, not firelight trick. Gold burned bright through his irises, ringed in black as his wolf surged to the surface. For one suspended heartbeat they stared at each other, too close, breath shared, and Rowena knew with gut-deep, bone-deep certainty what had happened. Mate. Terror came with it, immediate and brutal. Tobias's voice in the study, docile womb, collided with this fierce, impossible pull. A bond could be chain, a bond could be weapon, a bond could be the prettiest prison in the world. Then her wrists, where old servant brands and iron rub scars throbbed day and night, went abruptly cold. Not numb, cold, like snow packed over a burn. She hissed through her teeth. Wulfric looked down at her wrists, then back to her face, jaw tightening so hard a muscle jumped. He lowered her carefully until her boots found the floor, but did not let go until she steadied. Around them, people had gone quiet in widening circles. An elder muttered, "In front of witnesses?" Another, sharper, "Now? With Duskwalker at the gates?" Wulfric ignored them. He dropped to one knee on the hall stones in front of her, broad head bowed, and pressed his forehead to hers with a gentleness that made her throat ache. When he spoke, his voice was rough, carrying anyway. Mine to protect, never to possess. The words struck the room like a bell. Rowena's breath hitched. She should have recoiled, should have run. Instead, she stood frozen, fingers twisted in his sleeve, while relief cut through her so sharply it felt like grief. Outside, someone screamed, "South barricade holding!" A captain barked, "Archers to the west slit!" Wulfric lifted his head, still close enough that his breath warmed her cheek. "Can you stand?" "Yes," she lied. He read the lie instantly. "I need you conscious more than I need you proud." That almost made her laugh, except her vision was tunneling again. She nodded once, short and jerky. He rose in one smooth motion and turned, voice snapping back into command. "Bram, gate lines." Sarah, no steel drawn first unless they cross stakes. If Duskwalker asks parley, they wait until I say. His hand remained at Rowena's back, not caging, just there. Get Mira in here. Now. A gray braided healer pushed through the ring of bodies. Her gaze flicked from Rowena's face to Wulfric's eyes to their hands and went grim. You brought trouble home, Alpha. Trouble was already on the road, Wulfric said. The healer clicked her tongue, motioned Rowena toward a bench. Sit before you fall and split your head. Rowena didn't move until Wulfric stepped back first. He noticed. Of course he noticed. He spread both hands, empty, and gave her space. Only then did she sit. Mira pressed fingers to Rowena's wrist, then to her lower belly, muttering under her breath. Her brows climbed. Twins true. Different signatures true. She cut a look toward the watching council wolves. And yes, before any of you ask, the bond's real. I can smell it over wood smoke. Murmurs rippled, ugly and afraid. Two bonds mean blood feud. Tradition says. Wulfric's growl rolled low enough to rattle cups on the nearest table. Silence dropped fast. No one cites tradition at her like a threat in my hall, he said. Rowena looked up at him, startled by the wording. At her. Not to me, not for me. At her, as if she were the center of the question and not the object. He met her eyes once, briefly, and something in his expression gentled despite the chaos. Grief, carved face, scar pulling at his jaw, and an almost wary restraint, as if he were holding a wild thing that might bolt if he breathed too hard. Name? He asked quietly. She hesitated. The forged paper name tasted like ash now. Rowena. A beat. Rowena, he repeated, like an oath. He straightened and pointed to two guards. Room 3, East Wing. Posted watch. No one enters without her permission except Mira. That includes me. Shock flitted across more than one face. Wulfric didn't care. He looked back down at Rowena. Can you walk there? She nodded. Good. His voice lowered. You're safe until I fail. I don't plan to fail. Night came hard over the mountain, wind clawing at the half-finished hall and shoving smoke down chimneys. The riders hadn't breached, but they hadn't left either. Duskwalker black torches burned on the lower road. Regent red and bone standards glinted farther east like open wounds in the dark. Rowena lay on a narrow cot in room 3, boots still on, knife under her pillow, and counted breaths. At some point she slept. In the dream, she was back in the chain room under Duskwalker Estate. Iron bit her wrists. Someone laughed above her while keys scraped metal. Tobias said, almost kindly, "Open your mouth." She couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't. She jolted awake with a strangled cry, half off the cot, clawing at phantom cuffs. The room spun. Her wolf howled, frantic. She grabbed for the knife, found it, crouched against the wall with shaking hands. A knock sounded on the doorframe. Just once. Rowena. Wulfric's voice, low through wood. You're dreaming loud enough to wake the dead. I'm outside. Her pulse hammered. Don't come in. I won't. Silence stretched. Then, scrape, thud, scrape. Not footsteps. Something else. She edged closer and cracked the door 2 fingers wide, knife still in hand. Wulfric sat on the floor of the corridor, back to the opposite wall, long legs outstretched. A small carving blade moved in his hands over a block of pale cedar. Curled shavings lay around his boots like thin moons. He didn't look up immediately. Storm-felled tree from the North Ravine, he said, as if continuing a conversation. My mother said cedar keeps nightmares from nesting in nursery corners. Rowena stared. You're making a toy? Cradle rail. A brief glance toward her, then away again. Hands busy keeps wolves from doing stupid things. You think I'm going to run? I think you'd be smart to run from anyone who corners you. I'm making sure I'm not that anyone. The knife in her grip loosened by a fraction. He kept carving. Joran liked to sing off-key on patrol, and claimed it scared enemies. It mostly scared rabbits. Shave of wood. Nessa could track in rain so clean she found a stolen child by one bent fern. Shave. Pell snored like a sawmill, drove everyone mad. Rowena frowned through the fading panic. Who are they? My dead. He said it plain. No flourish, no dramatic pause. The words settled heavy between them. You talk about them often? She asked. Only when someone needs reminding silence isn't the only way to survive. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. He went on naming wolves. 15, 20, each with one specific human detail that kept them from becoming numbers. The corridor smelled of cedar and steel, and him, winter air over banked coals. Her breathing steadied without her permission. After a while, she opened the door wider and sat on the threshold, wrapped in a blanket, leaving a full arm's length between them. Wulfric did not move closer. Why never to possess? She asked into the dim. He turned the cradle piece in his hands, thumb tracing the grain. Because I was possessed once. By vengeance, by grief, by everyone who told me what an alpha should take to prove he was one. I buried enough of my own to know taking isn't the same as keeping safe. She looked at him sidelong. You could claim me, in front of witnesses. No one would challenge. Would you forgive me? No. Then I won't. Simple. Final. Not performative. Dawn crept gray and thin across the corridor stones before either of them spoke again. When it did, Wulfric rose with a small grunt, joints stiff, and held out a folded cloak. It was old, patched at one shoulder, lined with worn rabbit fur. Clean, but carrying history. Pine smoke, winter oil, faint lavender long faded. My mother's, he said. Warmest thing I own. Borrow it. Rowena took it carefully, as if it might vanish. Why? Because you're shivering. She pulled it around herself. Warmth sank in almost immediately, and with it a dangerous, aching comfort. Wulfric jerked his chin toward the hall. Council in 10. They're going to argue over your body like it's territory. I'd rather they choke on strategy first. He offered her a waxed map roll. Nursery wing goes on the east side. Pick patrol routes and blind spots. You know how hunted people think better than any of my captains. Rowena blinked at him. You're asking me to plan your defenses? I'm asking you to plan our defenses, if you choose to stay. No one had asked her judgment in years. No one had handed her anything except orders. She took the map. Council smelled like wet wool, old anger, and fear. By mid-morning, the hall filled with frostborn elders, captains, and 2 neutral witnesses from Cliff Pax who'd come to observe. Translation: carry gossip fast. Outside, horns still called from distant roads. Tobias and the regent were waiting for weakness. Rowena stood near the central post with the patched cloak around her shoulders and the map in hand. Wulfric stood at her right, not touching. Mira hovered on her left like a hawk, with herbs tucked in her belt. An elder with iron-gray braids slapped his palm on the table. This is madness. We shelter a claimant bait with omen twins while Duskwalker camps below us. Tradition exists for a reason. Another elder, narrow-faced and sharp-eyed, nodded. 2 bond twins split packs. Always have. Surrendering one to neutral guardianship prevents war. Rowena's jaw locked. Neutral means controllable. It means alive. It means stolen. Murmurs climbed. A third elder, broad and scarred, leaned forward and pointed at her belly. Words are wind. We haven't confirmed which babe carries alpha fire. Let me test the bond sign. He stepped around the table and reached for her. Wulfric moved faster than sight. One moment the elder's hand was outstretched. The next, Wulfric had seized his wrist, twisted, and drove him face first onto the table with a crack that echoed off rafters. The elder howled. "Touch her again," Wulfric said, voice flat as a drawn blade, "and I take the hand." No one breathed. He released, and the elder staggered back clutching his limp wrist, eyes watering with shock and rage. "You'd break council blood for consent," Wulfric snarled. "Learn the word." He turned to the full room, shoulders squared, alpha command flooding the space until even the neutral witnesses dropped their gaze. "Pack law changes now," he said. "Record it." He looked directly at the scribe by the hearth who fumbled for ink. "No pregnant wolf, mated, unmated, lowborn, highborn, can be touched, traded, tested, or voted over. Not by council, not by alpha, not by anyone. Violation is exile at minimum, death if repeated under coercion." The scribe's quill shook as it scratched. Elder Iron Braid spat on the floor. "You rewrite ancestral law because your cock picked a mate in a crisis." Rowena stiffened. Wulfric's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "No. I rewrite it because your version made room for men like Tobias." He jerked his chin toward the door. "Anyone unwilling to stand that law can walk down the mountain and ask Duskwalker for shelter." No one moved. The neutral witness cleared his throat. "Will she be under Frostborn claim then?" Rowena opened her mouth, but Wulfric spoke first, and this time he looked at her while he did it. "She stands under my name because she chose me, not because I claimed her." The room shifted, subtle but real. Not acceptance. Not yet. But a line had been drawn where everyone could see it. Before anyone could answer, a guard burst in, dragging a thin man by the collar. The prisoner wore tanner's leather, but his boots were too fine, and his scent carried regent incense under pig-fat disguise. "Caught him by the lower cistern," the guard said. "Spreading word the woman hexed our alpha with Starfall witchblood. Trying to stir panic in the labor tents." Hisses rose around the hall. Wulfric didn't even ask if the man denied it. "Square," he said. They hauled the spy outside to the moonstone set in Frostborn's center yard. A waist-high, pale rock veined with silver where truth oaths were sworn. Wind-whipped banners overhead, refugees crowded balconies and stair rails to watch. Wulfric shoved the spy to his knees and pressed his palm to Moonstone. "Swear. Speak one lie, and the stone brands you." The man licked cracked lips, eyes darting. I heard she enthralled you." The moonstone flashed. Black lines spidered up his throat like spilled ink. He screamed. Crowd noise surged. Wulfric waited until silence thinned it again. "Exile him beyond East Pass. Mark him oath burned." As guards dragged the sobbing spy away, Wulfric turned, found Rowena in the crowd, and held her gaze. Not triumph, not possession, just a steady, unflinching promise that whatever came next would happen in daylight, not hidden rooms. For the first time since she'd fled Duskwalker, Rowena felt her shoulders drop a fraction. Not safe, not healed, not whole, but less alone. When the crowd began to break, she stepped up beside him of her own accord, her motherless, patched cloak snapping in the wind, and handed him the marked-up patrol map. "I moved the nursery watch to the north eaves," she said. "Blind corner by the smoke shed is gone. No one gets in unseen now." Wulfric took the map, studying her edits, then her face. "Good." Rowena glanced toward the road where Duskwalker torches still burned in the distance, then back to the Alpha at her side. "My name," she said quietly, "is Rowena Starfall." His expression didn't change, as if he had suspected and decided it made no difference. "Then stand, Rowena Starfall," he said, voice low enough for only her to hear. "No one takes what you don't yield." This time, when his hand hovered near hers, she didn't flinch. She turned her palm up first. She turned her palm up first. Wulfric looked at her hand like it was a blade offered hilt first. Careful, deliberate, No room for arrogance. Then he set his calloused palm against hers. The bond tightened. A pulse of silver-gold heat ran up Rowena's arm, across her chest, and down into her belly where both heartbeats answered in two distinct flutters. Her breath caught. Around them, the last stragglers in the square noticed and went abruptly still. Not claimed. Chosen. Then a horn split the moment in two. 3 short blasts from the lower watchtower. Parley call. Captain Bram vaulted the steps to the square, mud to his knees. White banner on South Road, Duskwalker envoy with regent escort, 6 riders. No drawn steel yet. Wulfric's hand left hers at once, but his voice stayed calm. Gate but not hall. Search every saddle, every hem. Bram nodded and sprinted back. Rowena swallowed hard. The warmth from the palm touch still hummed under her skin, but fear slid over it like ice water. He didn't wait. He never does, Wulfric said. Come. They received the envoy in the lower gate court, between sharpened stakes and half-built stone, where everyone could see everyone's hands. Duskwalker colors arrived first. 2 black-cloaked riders, 1 standard-bearer, and at their center, Steward Halveth, Tobias's narrow-faced fox of a man, beard trimmed too neat for mountain weather. Beside him rode a regent blood priest in white and red, nails lacquered dark, smile thin as thread. Rowena knew that smile. Men who enjoyed clean gloves and dirty work wore it often. Halveth dismounted with theatrical slowness. Alpha Frostborn, lady. His gaze flicked to Rowena's face, sharpened, then softened into false pity. Forgive me. Habit. Girl. Wulfric stepped half a pace in front of Rowena without blocking her view. State your business and leave breathing. The blood priest laughed softly. Hostile. Understandable. You shelter contested property. Rowena felt Wulfric tense, but she spoke before he could. Say property again and see which of us removes your tongue. The priest's smile thinned further. Ah, the Starfall temper does survive servitude. Halveth produced a lacquered tube and handed it to a neutral scribe from Cliffpack Witness Detail. By authority of Regent and recognized houses at pre-solstice assembly, we deliver formal succession clarification. He turned so his voice carried to the wolves lining the walls. A codex recovered from Starfall archives states that in the event of twin issue from divided bonds, only one child may inherit sovereign line. The surplus child must be surrendered to a guardian house to prevent war. The courtyard erupted. Curses, shouts, disbelief. Halveth raised his voice over them. Given House Starfall extinction and Duskwalker's stewardship by lawful kin, he bowed mockingly toward Rowena. Guardian right defaults to Lord Tobias Duskwalker. Rowena's nails dug crescents into her palms. That codex is forged. Is it? The blood priest slid a second parchment free, seals dangling heavy in wax. Regent archivists verified this copy. Blood priesthood witnessed. Moon courts will honor it at solstice convocation. Wulfric's tone went deadly quiet. You rode here to demand one of my mate's children. The priest tilted his head. Not demand. Prevent catastrophe. We all know what 2 bond twins ignite. Pack schism, succession war, alpha challenge spirals. His eyes dropped pointedly to Rowena's abdomen. 1 child with lunar claim and 1 with alpha fire imprint. You carry civil war beneath your heart, my lady. Rowena took 1 step forward into open space so everyone saw her. I carry children, not bargaining chips. Halveth spread his hands. Then choose wisely which child you keep. Wulfric moved before thought, Wulf rising to his eyes. Bram and 2 captains grabbed his arms more to ground him than restrain. He didn't lunge, didn't need to. His growl rolled through the gate like thunder. Halveth blanched but recovered. There is more. He nodded to the blood priest. The priest drew a small silver knife and sliced his own palm, letting blood drip onto a black stone charm etched with spirals. The charm hissed, smoked, then flared blue. Every wolf in the court recoiled from the stink, burned rosemary and old grave dirt. Severance rite sanction, the priest said with priestly satisfaction. If custody disputes continue, the fire-marked infant can be ritually separated from maternal scent memory and alpha bond imprint at birth. Cleanly transferred to appointed guardianship. No pack claim confusion. Rowena's stomach turned so violently she nearly doubled over. Wulfric went still in a way more frightening than rage. Say that again. The priest met his gaze. We can cut a bond before it roots. Lawful mercy. Mutilation, Mira spat from behind Rowena. You call butchery mercy? The priest wiped his palm and sheathed the knife. Call it governance. Halveth mounted his horse. You are summoned to solstice convocation at Stone Crown in 6 days. Bring the woman. Bring whatever proof you think outranks sealed codex. His smile returned, fox bright and cruel. Or refuse and be declared oath-evading kidnappers of royal issue. He wheeled his horse, then glanced back at Rowena. Lord Tobias sends personal regards. He says he looks forward to seeing whether you kneel more gracefully now. Wulfric tore free of Bram's grip. Rowena caught his forearm with both hands before he could take one step. His gaze snapped to hers, wild gold and blazing. Not here, she said, voice shaking but iron underneath. Not on his terms. For a breath she thought he might ignore her. Then he looked at her hands on him, forced one harsh breath through his teeth, and nodded once. The envoys rode out alive. It did not feel like mercy. It felt like war choosing paperwork before blood. By sundown, Frostborn Hall was louder than a battlefield and twice as divided. Maps covered every table. Messengers ran in and out with wet cloaks and bad news. Cliffpack, Riverfang, and 2 Southern Alphas had sent identical notes. If Starfall twins are verified, present for adjudication or forfeit neutral protection. Translation: show us your children so we can decide who gets to steal one. Rowena stood at the strategy table, jaw set, while 3 elders argued over evacuation routes as though she were not there. Move her to ice caves till convocation passes. Caves trap scent. Blood priests can smoke them out. Then send decoy litters. Spread rumors she miscarried. I'm done listening to plans that begin with lying about my body, Rowena snapped. The nearest elder flinched. Good. Wulfric entered from the yard, snow on his shoulders and fury under his skin. He tossed a broken arrowhead onto the map. Supply wagon from North Pass hit with Wolfsbane pitch. 2 guards sick, 1 dead. Attackers wore no colors. Rival packs? Bram asked. Could be Tobias. Could be Regent hirelings. Could be opportunists. Wulfric scrubbed a hand over his scarred jaw. Doesn't matter. We're being softened. Pressure pressed from all sides now. Outside blades, inside fear. Refugee families whispered about omens at cook fires. A pair of young wolves nearly came to claws over whether the fire baby should be hidden or surrendered. Someone painted old rune marks on the nursery beams overnight, a split moon with one half crossed out. Mira scraped them off herself with a kitchen knife. Through it all, the bond pulled harder. Every time Rowena and Wulfric crossed paths, heat flashed low and immediate, startling as hunger. She hated that she wanted that warmth, while the world tried to pry her children apart. Late afternoon, she bent over a ledger and dizziness slammed her so hard black spots swam. Strong hands steadied her elbows, then instantly released. May I? Wulfric asked. Even now. Even shaking. He asked. She nodded once. His palm settled lightly between her shoulder blades, grounding. The bond eased her nausea by fractions. She hated being grateful for it. She was grateful anyway. You need broth, he said. I need a legal miracle and 3 less armies. That too. She almost smiled. Almost. A scout burst in before she could speak. Message from Stone Crown, convocation agenda posted. Bram broke the seal, scanned, and swore. They moved custody arbitration to First Bell, before combat petitions, fast-track ruling. Who requested? Wulfric asked. The scout answered. House Duskwalker and Regent Blood Priesthood jointly. Of course they had. Decide the children quickly, then make any challenge look like emotional disorder from a desperate mother. Rowena reached for the parchment, read the cold legal script, and felt old servant helplessness claw up her throat. No, not again. She set the page down carefully. Then we don't arrive unprepared. Elder Iron Braid, wrist splinted from that morning, sneered from the shadows. Prepared with what? Tears and love speeches? Law is seal and witness, girl. Rowena turned slowly. I was taught treaty law before you knew how to spell your own lineage marks. He barked a laugh. Buy a dead house. Buy a house your betters had to forge documents to steal. The hall went very quiet. Wulfric didn't interrupt. He stood at her shoulder, presence like a wall she had chosen, not one built around her. Rowena tapped the convocation notice. If Tobias wants this in law, then law can kill him. Bram's brows drew down. How? Rowena looked toward the eastern dark where Stone Crown waited beyond ridges and old graves. Find me every surviving servant, clerk, guard, and bastard cousin who ever handled Starfall archives before the fire. Anyone who remembers the original codex bindings, ink recipes, witness lists. You think you can prove forgery? Mira asked. Rowena's smile was thin and sharp. I think Tobias taught me exactly where he hides his lies. Night settled rough and wind loud, driving everyone indoors except sentries and fools. Rowena found the half-built nursery wing by scent of fresh cedar and lamp oil. Moonlight leaked through unfinished eaves, striping the floor silver. A cradle frame sat on 2 trestles, one side carved smooth, the other still raw wood. Wulfric was there, sleeves rolled, carving blade in hand. He looked up when she entered, then set the blade down point away. Couldn't sleep either. She crossed to the cradle and touched the sanded rail. You kept working. If I stop moving, I imagine too much. She leaned against a post, tired clear through her bones. I used to hide in my mother's chart room during storms. Her voice surprised her, soft in the dark. Shelves smelled like leather and ink. My nurse would find me and pretend she couldn't, so I'd feel clever. Wulfric watched her carefully. Your nurse. Is she alive? Rowena swallowed. I don't know. Her name was Isabet. She taught me to braid my hair for court and to gut fish when court failed us. A short, humorless laugh. She smuggled me sugared pears under napkins when Tobias made me serve banquets after the massacre. She'd squeeze my shoulder once as she passed, so I remembered I was real. She hadn't said Isabet's name aloud in years. Speaking it felt like opening an old stitched wound and finding heartbeat beneath. Wulfric stepped closer, stopping an arm's length away. You are real, he said quietly, even when they built your life around pretending otherwise. Her eyes burned. She looked down fast. Don't be kind to me right now. Why? Because I'll lean. His expression changed, something fierce and tender crossing at once. Then lean. Silence stretched. Wind rattled the eaves. Rowena took one step, then another. She stopped just in front of him, close enough to feel heat through wool and skin. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. Any of it. Mate bond. Trust. Needing someone without handing them the knife. Wulfric's voice dropped to a rough murmur. You're doing it now. She laughed once, wet and shaky. Badly. Still counts. He lifted his hand, paused in open air. May I? Her chest tightened. She nodded. His fingers touched her cheek, featherlight. No demand, no push. just presence. The bond flared warm, not consuming this time, steady, like banked fire. Rowena closed her eyes and leaned into his palm. The twins kicked hard, one after the other. She startled and caught his wrist, guiding his hand down. Here! Wulfric's palm spread over the curve of her belly. The first kick landed against him. Then the second. Offset. Different strength. Different rhythm. His breath hitched with wonder so naked it undid her. Gods, he whispered. They argue already, she said, a real smile flickering. Silver one hates spice. Fire one hates silence. He laughed under his breath, forehead dropping to hers. Sounds familiar. They stood there, breathing the same air, noses almost brushing. If she moved an inch, their mouths would meet. A shout split the night. Gate! Runner from South Switchback! Wulfric cursed softly, stepped back at once. Stay here. No. He hesitated only a second, then nodded. With me. They ran. The runner collapsed in the hall doorway, face bloodless, one sleeve soaked red. Bram hauled him upright while Mira shoved cloth at the wound. Speak, Wulfric ordered. The runner panted, words tripping over each other. Cart from Valley Shrine, arrived under truce cloth, said delivery for Lady Starfall only, wouldn't open for guards. Rowena's skin went cold. Where is it? In the square. Crowd already gathered when they reached Moonstone. Refugees, guards, elders, children shoved behind legs. At the center sat a narrow cedar box bound in black ribbon and sealed with Duskwalker wax. No one touched it. Halveth's voice carried from memory. Lord Tobias sends regards. Wulfric moved to step forward. Rowena caught his arm. Trap! Bram signaled two spearmen who approached with shields raised. One cut the ribbon with a pike tip. No blast. No dart. No curse smoke. The second lifted the lid. He made a broken sound and staggered back, retching. Mira pushed past, looked in, and went stone still. Rowena didn't remember walking forward. One moment she was by Wulfric. The next she stood over the box with her own breath roaring in her ears. Inside, wrapped in white linen now soaked rust brown, lay a woman's severed finger. A plain brass ring still clung to the knuckle, worn smooth on one side, where it had rubbed years against a loom shuttle. Rowena knew that ring. Isabet's. Beneath it sat a folded note in Tobias's sharp, elegant hand. Wulfric tried to take it first. Rowena bared her teeth at him, raw instinct, and he stopped, hands up. She picked up the letter with fingers that did not feel like hers and read aloud because the crowd demanded witness, because secrecy had nearly killed her once. Bring me the fire-marked babe, or the next piece is her tongue. Noise exploded, curses, sobs, wolves howling rage to the moon. Rowena didn't hear any of it. She stared at the blood on the linen and saw a warm kitchen, a hidden sugared pear, a hand squeezing her shoulder once in passing. Wulfric's voice reached her as if from far away. We ride tonight. Bram answered. Into what? Duskwalker wants us blind and furious. Another scout shoved through the crowd before anyone could argue. More news. Regent priests entered Stone Crown 2 hours ago. They've raised a black rite tent by Convocation Ring, guarded heavy. Severance rite, not threat. Preparation. Mira gripped Rowena's elbow. Sit. You're white as bone. Rowena shook her off and lifted Isabet's ring from the box. Blood slicked her thumb. Her wolf rose, not cowering this time, teeth bared. She looked up at Wulfric, eyes burning. No, she said, voice low and lethal. We don't ride blind. We go where all packs can witness. We drag this into law and blood truth before he cuts anything else from her. Wind tore through the square, carrying the stink of iron and storm. Above them, from the south ridge, a new horn began to sound. Deep, formal, 3 long notes that meant convocation banners on the move. They were out of time. The horn on the south ridge sounded again. 3 long notes. Then one sharp cut that meant convocation marshal on the road. No more time. No more private grief. In Frostborn Hall, wolves shouted over each other, maps sliding off tables, messengers colliding in doorways. Wulfric slammed a fist down hard enough to rattle cups. Enough. Silence hit in ragged pieces. He looked like carved winter. Scar bright on his jaw. Eyes gone molten gold with barely leashed rage. I can take 40 and hit Duskwalker Keep before dawn. Kill Tobias in his bed. End this before Stonecrown opens. Half the room shouted yes. Rowena stood very still with Isabet's blood drying tacky on her thumb and felt the old trap yawning beneath that plan. Hidden blades, hidden bodies. Hidden truth buried under whoever survived to tell it. No, she said. Head snapped toward her. Wulfric's did too. She met his stare. That is what he wants. A shadow war he can spin into alpha-kidnapped royal issue and murdered lawful steward. We lose in law, even if we win in blood. He cut your nurse to bait you, Wulfric ground out. He forged my death once already. I won't hand him my children with my own bad strategy. She stepped to the center table, pushed aside a route map, and flattened her palm on bare wood. We go to Stone Crown, in daylight, under witness. Elder Ironbraid laughed bitterly. With what proof, girl? His seals outweigh your tears. Rowena turned slowly toward him. Then we bring better seals. She faced Wulfric again. Regent keeps original succession records in Stone Crown Archive Annex during convocation weeks. Locked vault above old servant cellars. Her pulse kicked harder. I know a tunnel into that cellar. I used it as a child to sneak into the kitchens when court dinners ran long. Mira stared. You can reach the archive unseen? If the tunnel hasn't collapsed. Rowena's mouth went thin. If it has, I die in a hole, and you can all call me reckless at my funeral. Wulfric moved in close, voice low and dangerous. I'm not letting you crawl into Regent Stone while Tobias's dogs hunt you. She lifted her chin. You said no one takes what I don't yield. I'm not yielding this fight. For one hard breath they stood chest to chest, fury and fear and bond heat crackling between them. Then Wulfric exhaled once through his nose. You don't go alone. Agreed. Me, Bram, you, no more. Agreed. He touched his forehead to hers briefly, not a kiss, a battlefield vow. Then we steal your crown back. Stone Crown rose from the mountain like a broken tooth of moon-pale granite, ringed in torch lines and banners from every pack in the north. Convocation camps sprawled down both slopes. Wolves, mercenaries, priests, legal scribes, merchants selling oath charms and hot eel pies to people waiting to watch law become violence. By first gray light, the forged codex had already done its work. Rowena heard it in whispers as they passed under Truce Gate. Starfall woman carrying split heirs. Custody hearing at first bell. Duskwalker claims guardian right. Severance right tense already blessed. They searched Wulfric's party 3 times before admitting them to lower terraces. Blood priests in red-white masks prowled near a black pavilion staked beside the convocation ring. The stink of burning herbs and old blood rolled off it in waves. On the ring's far side stood Tobias Duskwalker, sable cloak immaculate, silver wolf pin glinting where her mother's moon sigil should have been. He was speaking with Halveth and the same lacquer-nailed priest from Frostborn Gate. They looked pleased. Rowena's skin crawled. Wulfric caught the shift in her breathing. Eyes on me, he murmured. One task. One task, she repeated. Bram led them along the outer wall, through cart yards and refuse alleys where no one important looked. At a crumbled cistern behind the old kitchens, Rowena knelt and pried up a rusted grate hidden under nettles. Cold, damp air breathed up from darkness. Bram muttered, Gods! There really is a hole. Used to be a drainage run, Rowena said. Then servants widened it for smuggling wine. Wulfric's mouth twitched despite everything. Royal ingenuity. Royal thirst. She dropped in first. The tunnel was narrower than memory and twice as foul. Mud sucked at her boots. Rats skittered. Once the ceiling shed stones, and Bram caught her before she slipped. They crawled by touch for what felt like an hour, then reached a brick wall scored with old chalk marks. Kitchen tally signs she had scratched with Isabet when she was 11 and hungry and pretending rules were optional. Her throat tightened. She pressed 2 stones in sequence. Mortar clicked. A panel shifted inward. Archive cellar. Shelves rose in black rows, chained ledgers stacked to the ceiling, wax and vellum thick in the air. Above, muffled voices drifted through floor grates, scribes preparing hearing copies. Wulfric stood guard at the door while Bram worked a lock with a bent pick. Rowena moved fast through memory and logic, Starfall section by era, succession volumes bound in dusk blue leather with silver thread, witness appendices separate by reign. She found the Regent copy chest first. Inside sat the codex Tobias had been waving. 2 new at the spine, thread wrong color. Ink uniform where true royal entries aged uneven by scribe and decade. Forgery. Good, but not enough. Rowena, Bram hissed. Steps. She shoved deeper into stacks, scanning shelf labels by lantern slit. SF-succession/primary. Empty. No. She looked lower, servant logic, not archivist pride, and saw a dustless gap behind tax annals. Reached in, her fingers hit leather, colder than surrounding books, embossed with the old starfall moon split by a running wolf. Original codex. She yanked it free, almost sobbing with relief. A packet slid with it, loose witness leaves, one bearing Tobias's own younger signature on a receipt transferring deceased claimant documents 3 years after she'd supposedly died. Wulfric looked over as she emerged. One glance at her face, and he knew. Move, he said. They were halfway back through the cellar when alarms exploded above. Bells, shouts, the crash of overturned stools. Someone had found the open panel. They ran. Tunnel mud turned treacherous under panic. Rowena slipped, slammed shoulder first into rock, and the codex flew from her hands into black water. No! She lunged. Wulfric dropped flat, caught her belt with one hand and the codex with the other before current dragged it into a drain cut. His arms strained, muscles shaking. Bram! He barked. Bram braced Wulfric's legs while Rowena crawled forward and snatched the book from his grip, hugging it to her chest. Behind them, voices echoed into the tunnel mouth. Light down there? Seal the lower grate? Wulfric shoved her ahead. Go, Rowena, go! They burst from the cistern into cold daylight as 2 convocation guards rounded the alley. Bram met one with a shoulder check. Wulfric slammed the other into stone. Rowena ran with the codex clutched under her cloak and blood singing in her ears. When they hit the main terrace, first bell was already tolling. The custody hearing had begun without them. The convocation ring was packed shoulder to shoulder. Alphas on carved benches, elders under clan standards, neutral scribes at low desks, blood priests in a red-white crescent around the black rite tent. At center, Moonstone sat in a wide circle of packed ash. Tobias stood at the speaking rail, voice rich with practiced sorrow. And though my niece has suffered confusion under Frostborn influence, House Duskwalker seeks only stability for the realm and safety for both infants. Halveth dragged someone forward in chains. Isabet. Alive. Barely. Her hair had gone almost fully white. Bruises flowered across her face. Her right hand was bandaged to the wrist where one finger was missing. A gag cut the corners of her mouth raw. Rowena's vision narrowed to a red point. Tobias spread his hands to the judges. As proof of my good faith, I preserve this former servant who aided the girl's prior deceptions. Let her testimony guide us once she is properly encouraged. The crowd roared, some in outrage, some in approval, some just hungry for spectacle. A marshal shouted, "Claimant absent at first bell. Custody default to petitioner pending." Objection. Rowena's voice cracked like a whip across the ring. Heads turned in a wave. She walked down the central aisle through parted bodies, cloak gone, hair unbound and streaked with ash from tunnel stone. Bram had jammed a narrow iron circlet onto her head before they entered. No jewels, just blackened metal and two upward points like crescent horns. In her arms, she carried the codex. Wulfric paced half a step behind, Wolf close enough to skin that strangers flinched from his scent. Rowena stepped into the moonstone circle and lifted her chin. "I am Rowena Ilara Starfall," she said, voice carrying to the far benches. "Daughter of Queen Maelys Starfall and King Orin, living claimant by blood and by surviving witness. I reject forced custody proceedings over my body and my children. I invoke trial of blood truth." Convocation froze. One elder judge sputtered, "Trial requires standing sovereign or acknowledged successor." Rowena threw the codex onto the scribe table. It hit with a crack of leather and silver clasps. "Then acknowledge." Scribes lunged for it. Pages flashed under lanterns. One old archivist went pale and stammered, "Primary seal, original witness wax." Gods, this is first binding. Tobias's composure slipped for the first time. The blood priest snapped, "Stolen property. Regent archive theft voids. Read page 72. Rowena said, not looking away from Tobias. "Succession contingency. Issue of divided bonds shall not be severed, surrendered, or separated from living parent by council, pack, or regent decree." Read the witness names. My mother's hand. Frostborn elder witness from treaty year. Yours is not there, priest. Murmurs surged into shouting. A judge hammered the rail. "Silence." Rowena pointed at Tobias. "And read, Appendix C, receipt ledger." His signature acknowledging transfer of claimant death papers after date of alleged execution. "He forged my death. He forged this hearing. He kidnapped and mutilated a crown witness to coerce surrender of my child." Tobias smiled with too many teeth. Emotional theatrics from a breeding vessel. Wulfric moved. Rowena lifted one hand without turning. He stopped. Her voice sharpened. "By Starfall right and convocation law, I name Tobias Duskwalker oathbreaker and usurper. I challenge him to single combat under blood truth. Winner determines immediate custody law for my twins and disposition of Starfall stewardship." Gasps, then a rush of voices like wind through pines. Judges conferred in frantic whispers. The oldest raised a shaking hand. "Challenge. Accepted under ancient clause. Arms inspected. No charms." Tobias laughed softly, bowing with mock elegance. "If it pleases my queenly niece." Halveth shoved Isabet to her knees near the rail as if to remind Rowena what losing would cost. Rowena stripped off her cloak, took the short sword Wulfric offered hilt first, and unhooked something else from her belt. Two linked iron cuffs, cleaned but not polished, her old servant shackles. She wrapped the chain around her left forearm. Tobias's eyes flicked to it and narrowed. "Still sentimental," he murmured. "No," Rowena said. "Practical." They closed at Moonstone. Tobias fought like a court butcher. Efficient, unshowy, always angled for artery. Rowena fought like someone who had survived in kitchens, alleys, tunnels, and nightmares. Quick feet, shortcuts, no wasted movement. First exchange. Steel rang, sparks spat. Tobias drove her back with brute strength. Second. He feinted high, kicked her knee, and she barely kept balance. Crowd noise pounded in her skull. He smiled while they circled. "You should have stayed hidden, little ghost. You were easier when you scrubbed my floors." "You should have killed me when you had chains," she panted, I did better. I taught you your place. He flicked his wrist. Powder burst from his sleeve into her face. Wolfsbane. It hit her tongue, her nose, burned down her throat. Her wolf shrieked and recoiled. Knees buckling, Rowena staggered. Tobias lunged, bone-hilt blade appearing in his offhand where inspectors had missed it. The hidden knife slashed her ribs. Heat, then wet. Crowd erupted. Someone screamed foul. Tobias leaned close enough she smelled wine on his breath. Yield the fire-marked brat, and I'll let the silver one keep your scent. Rowena spat blood in his face. He snarled and came again, knife for her belly. She dropped low, took the cut along her side rather than center line, and whipped her left arm up. Chain links snapped around his knife wrist. She twisted, using his own forward drive. Bone cracked. The knife clattered away. Tobias roared, trying to wrench free. Rowena planted her feet, hauled the chain tight, and slammed her short sword through his shoulder. Blade punched flesh, then stone beneath with a hard final thunk, pinning him to moonstone. He howled. Black smoke hissed from his throat where he had sworn innocence earlier at opening rites. Truth oath lines burned up his neck in branching ink. Rowena braced on the sword hilt, breathing fire. Tobias glared up, blood in his teeth. You were easier on your knees, niece. Her voice went cold as winter water. I learned down there exactly where to cut. She yanked the genuine codex from Bram's hands, opened to marked pages, and read aloud, while Tobias bled and writhed against pinned steel. By Queen Malis Starfall Seal and Witness Law, Tobias Duskwalker, third cousin, granted temporary wardship only. Any coercive claim upon direct heir constitutes kin treason. She turned a page. Punishment. Death by sovereign blade under public witness. The eldest judge stood. Blood truth marks validate. Challenge winner recognized. Halveth bolted for the outer stairs. Bram tackled him before he made 3 steps. The blood priest made a sign toward the black right tent. Wulfric was already moving. He seized the priest by the throat and slammed him face down on the rail. Right is ended, he said, and every Frostborn in the crowd drew steel at once. Rowena looked at Tobias one last time. No more stolen girls, she said. She drew the royal execution blade offered by a judge, longer, heavier, moon-etched, and with one clean, two-handed stroke, took his head. Silence slammed down after the thud. Then the ring exploded in sound, howls, shouts, sobbing, cheers, prayers. Wulfric stood at ring edge, arms spread, holding back the surge long enough for law scribes to witness and mark the sentence complete. Rowena did not shake until it was done. She wiped the blade, handed it back, and walked straight to Isabet. The old nurse was crying behind the gag. Rowena cut chains herself. Little moon, Isabet rasped when the gag came free, voice shredded but unmistakable. Rowena dropped to her knees and pressed her forehead to Isabet's. I'm here. Behind them, judges barked orders. Duskwalker Holdings seized pending tribunal. Halveth convicted oath complicit and sentenced to stone quarries for life. Blood priesthood severance sanction void. Attending priests stripped of convocation standing and exiled east beyond pass. Law, at last, happening in daylight. They lit Tobias's pyre at dusk on a lower terrace where wind carried ash away from camp. Rowena stood until the flames took fully, until sable and bone and arrogance all burned the same color. When she turned away, her side wound throbbed under fresh bandage and exhaustion dragged at every limb. Wulfric waited by the unfinished shrine wall, expression tight with held back everything. No counsels, he said quietly, no witnesses, just us. She nodded. They went to a small stone chamber above the ring, once a prayer room, now empty except for one lamp and a wool blanket folded on a bench. Moonlight poured through a slit window, silvering dust. For a long moment neither spoke. Then Rowena stepped close, took his hand, and guided it to the back of her neck where shoulder met throat, pulse jumping hard. "Ask me," she whispered. Wulfric's eyes went dark gold, reverent and wrecked all at once. "Rowena Starfall," he said, voice rough. "Will you take my mark as mate and equal? Mine in protection, yours in every way that matters?" "Yes." He held her gaze another heartbeat, giving space for no. She lifted her chin, baring skin. His canines sank at the junction of neck and shoulder. Pain flashed white, sharp, electric, consuming for one suspended instant. Rowena gasped and clutched his shirt, knees almost giving. Then the pain broke open into heat, fierce and molten, pouring down her spine and through her chest into her belly. Both twins kicked in sudden synchrony, hard enough to make her cry out again, but this time in astonished, breathless wonder. The bond roared awake, not a thread now, an entire river. Silver moonlight and ember fire, cedar and snow and iron and her own wild scent braided together until she could feel him everywhere. His racing pulse, his iron control cracking, the raw, protective tenderness he kept hidden from everyone but the dead, and now her. Wulfric lifted his mouth from the mark, lips blood-warm against her skin. "Mine," he breathed, almost disbelieving. Rowena cupped his jaw, thumb streaking through the blood at his mouth. "Yours," she answered, and then her voice sharpened with intent. "Turn." He blinked. "Rowena." "Turn, mate." A startled, broken laugh escaped him. He obeyed, shrugging his coat aside to bare the shoulder where Alpha Mark sat when taken in challenge and oath. Rowena ran her tongue once over her own canines, tasted iron from him, then bit down hard into the muscle above his shoulder blade. He groaned, half pain, half something deeper, and grabbed her hips to stay upright. Blood welled hot over her tongue. She held just long enough to mark, then released and pressed her palm over the wound as if sealing wax. "Mine," she said against his skin. His answering shudder ran through both of them. The bond surged again, brighter, wider. His wolf meeting hers without cages, without commands, just recognition so complete it stole breath. "Mate," he whispered into her hair. "Mate." They sank together to the blanket on the bench, limbs tangled, foreheads touching. No rush for more than this. Just holding and being held while the completed bond settled from wildfire to deep, steady flame. Rowena traced the edge of his fresh mark. No pack vote touches them. Ever. No pack, no crown, no god takes what is ours, Wulfric said against her lips. She kissed him once, soft and deliberate, then rested her brow to his. "Then stand with me, king." "Always, queen." Outside, the pyre popped in the wind. Inside, heartbeat met heartbeat until she could no longer tell where one ended. 3 days later, under full witness at Stone Crown, Rowena and Wulfric signed the Frostborn Starfall Accord in black ink and moonstone dust. Rowena stood at the high table with her ash iron circlet replaced by a forged silver-black crown that left her scar visible. Wulfric stood at her left, marked shoulder uncovered by choice, her bite dark against his skin for every rival alpha to see. The oldest judge read the core articles aloud. No child may be separated from a living parent by pack vote, regent decree, or bloodline petition. Guardianship and succession require consent of parent and, when of age, consent of heir. Any severance rite performed without explicit subject consent is kin-maiming and high crime. One by one, pack leaders came forward to press thumbprints in wax. Some glared, some nodded. None refused. Elder Iron Braid approached last, splint still on his wrist. He set his mark down, then faced Rowena with visible effort. "I was wrong," he said, voice gravel-thick. Tradition kept cowards comfortable. Rowena inclined her head. "Then do better with what comes next." He did. Isabet watched from a cushioned chair near Mira, right hand bandaged, eyes wet but bright. When Rowena returned to her seat, Isabet squeezed her forearm with the same one-count pressure from years ago. Bram, promoted formally to shield captain, delivered Halveth in shackles to quarry wardens before sunset. The blood priest who had sanctioned severance was marched east under oath brand, stripped of rank, his black charm crushed under moonstone hammer. By winter's first deep snow, Duskwalker Keep flew no banners at all. Its land split between displaced families Tobias had burned out years prior. And in Frostborn Hall, in the nursery wing, Rowena had redesigned herself. Labor came with thunder and cedar smoke. Mira barked orders. Wulfric held Rowena's hand only when she gripped first and offered his shoulder for her teeth, when contractions hit hard enough to break speech. Isabet wiped her brow and called her little moon between curses. The first twin arrived just before dawn, furious and loud, eyes opening silver like polished frost. The second came moments later with a quieter cry, and ember gold irises that fixed on Wulfric as if already unimpressed by everyone's panic. For one suspended beat, the room went utterly still. Then Mira laughed, a wet, startled, joyful sound. Well, there's your omen. Looks more like promise. Wulfric bent over both babies and looked like a man seeing spring after a decade of winter. Rowena, exhausted and shaking, pulled him down by the shirt and pressed her forehead to his. Both, she whispered. Always both, he said. At the naming feast, no one asked which child to surrender. They named the silver-eyed girl Lyra Maelis Starfall Frostborn, and the ember-eyed boy Cale Joran Frostborn Starfall, for the dead carried forward and the future chosen on purpose. Later, when the hall emptied and the babies finally slept, Wulfric stood on a stool repairing one last nursery beam that had split in dry cold. Rowena sat at the table below with Lyra against her chest, Cale in a sling at her side, drafting enforcement clauses for the new guardianship law, while wolf pups chased each other under benches. She looked up at her mate. His mark and hers both visible, sawdust in his hair, tenderness in every scarred line of him, and smiled. Once, never, had been a threat. Now it was policy. A promise hammered into law, into timber, into flesh. No one would take what was theirs again.